In this tutorial, we'll expand on some of the ideas about lighting that we covered in the earlier videos. We'll talk about point lights, spotlights, and how to make any object a light source. Next, we'll show you how to use global lights and how to use images for light domes. Last, we'll briefly cover the new HDR Light Studio plugin and show you how to create custom lighting and reflections that are tailor-made for your scene. I'm going to start this tutorial by talking about lights that are within your scene, as opposed to global lighting that sits on the outside. Normally, I'd recommend that you start lighting your scene using the global lighting options, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll start small and then go big. We're using a simple scene I previously created that just contains these basic objects. Right now, the scene has no light sources. If I switch the view display method from hidden line to smooth shaded, you can see that all the objects are simply black due to the lack of light. I'll switch back to hidden line so you can get a sense of the geometry when there are no lights. Let's add a point light by using the point light tool to place one here in the center. Just like drawing in any object, lights are placed on the active grid. For a point light, that means the source of the light is at the same level as the circle I'm using for the floor. You can see how it lights up these objects. If I turn on Live Ray, you can see the effect in greater detail. I'll turn up the intensity for this point light to 200% using the Object Properties palette. The Live Ray settings include some radiant illumination, so you can see that the circle floor is getting some light that's being bounced from the objects onto the floor, but no direct light from the point light. This is because the point light is at the exact same level as the floor, and no light is cast directly onto the floor. We can raise the light up a little by switching to the X grid. I'll just hit the X hotkey and then drag the light up. I'll switch back to the Y grid. Looking at the object properties for this light in more detail, you can see a variety of settings in this panel. Like most objects in Design 3D, you can give the light a name. The intensity slider only goes up to 100, but you can type in any number, like the 200% I put in earlier. This button lets you set a color for the light. These two menus let you add gels and effects to the light. Let's apply this disco ball gel. And from the effects menu, we'll add this lens flare. Live Ray renders the disco ball gel because gels are what are referred to as in-render effects. The lens flare is a post-render effect. So to see the lens flare, we have to use the rendering tool to see the effect. I'll remove these effects so we can more closely see the effect of the remaining settings. This pop-up menu gives us numerical access to the total fall-off distance, the full intensity distance, and the light source radius. First, I'll adjust the light source radius. The default value for the light source radius is 5 inches. This has the effect as if the light itself were a 10-inch diameter ball in the scene. This naturally causes the shadows cast from such a large radius object to be very soft. If I reduce the diameter to something like 0.1, you can see that the shadows are now much sharper. Switching the menu to total fall-off distance, I can change how far the light goes before it no longer casts any light. If I change this from 1000 to, say, 3, you'll see a second red circle showing up in the modeling view. Previously, the control was 1000 inches away from the light source, outside the view of the modeling window. The inner red circle is the full intensity controller. Now we can interactively control both the full intensity and total falloff of the light. Live Ray shows you the effect of changing these settings. Now I'll set the total falloff distance to 50 so that the light goes out past the objects. Then I'll uncheck the photon checkbox. Photons are used for effects like caustics, which we aren't using right now. Next, I'll uncheck the shadows checkbox. You can see that the light seems to be going right through the objects and not casting any shadows. Now let's delete the point light and draw in a spotlight. With spotlights, you can drop one in using a single click, or you can draw one in by clicking and dragging. When you click and drag, you're able to establish the direction as you insert the light. As with point lights, you can make adjustments using handles on the selected spotlight. These rings indicate the angle of the light cone. I can broaden and narrow the outer cone and the full intensity inner cone. I can also adjust the full intensity distance using this handle. By grabbing the light shaft center line, I can drag the light while maintaining its direction. Or I can drag the spotlight icon and maintain its center point while changing the direction. One quick way to raise an object off the active grid is to hold down the Command and Shift keys while you drag the object. This enables a temporary guide that's perpendicular to the active grid. Like the point light, there are many options available in the Object panel of the Object Properties palette. You'll want to review the user guide for more info on those. Now we'll review how to turn any object into a light source. We'll turn this sphere into a light source. The trick is to make the object glow, and to do that we use a texture. So we'll set up this texture to only produce a glow. We won't have any other channels contributing to the surface. If I crank up the glow, you'll see that the preview goes from black to a pure white and the ground underneath the sphere starts to illuminate. You can see how the sphere is now acting as a light source in the scene. If you don't want the object itself to appear in the scene, but still act as a light source, we can go to the Edit menu and select the Instance Properties command. This dialog offers many options, but for now let's just click the center radio button down here. This will make it so the sphere won't show in the rendering, but will still cast light. Now let's review the global lighting options. You control the global lighting options from the Lights panel of the Environment palette using a combination of the lighting sphere and these three sections across the bottom. The lighting options include global light sources, the light dome, and ambient fill light. I'll cover them briefly. As I mentioned, global lighting should probably be your first choice in lighting your models. When you create a new empty model, it starts life with a single global light source. I'll add a global light to this model. Global lights act similar to sunlight and are an infinite distance from your model. They default to being pinpoint size and generate these very sharp-edged shadows. If you look at the options in the global light drawer, you'll see options that apply to the currently selected global light. These options are similar to the ones you saw in the Object Properties for spot and point lights. One interesting feature that's new to version 8 is the ability to cast soft shadows. As with the spotlights, point lights, and glowing objects, the relative size of the light source is the important factor in soft shadows. For global lights, this is measured in angular diameter. In a nutshell, how much of the surrounding sphere surface the light takes up. If we move the slider about halfway, we should get some very soft shadows. Notice how soft these shadows are in contrast. You'll see a slowdown in the rendering time with soft shadows because it takes more calculations to define a soft shadow instead of the hard, more crisp shadows. Keep in mind that Live Ray only represents an approximation of your scene. To get a higher quality rendering, you'll want to use the Render tool. Now we'll review the light dome. We'll hide the global light for now. Light domes can use images and mathematically calculated backgrounds to light your scene. The sun and sky background calculates a sky and horizon colors based on the position of the global light. For example, if you move the light towards the horizon, you get sunset light coloration of the light dome. For image-based backgrounds, you can use a high dynamic range image. This can be a good way to recreate the lighting from a real-world scene. I'll load a background to use for a light dome. When I render this, I get very warm, very soft lighting. A little too warm and non-directional for my liking. There are many ways to correct this. I can dim the light dome some and add local lights or a global light. But to stay with the light dome, we can adjust the image itself. The light dome drawer offers a lot of options. The one we'll work with now is the Adjust Image button and the Show Lighting Zones checkbox. With the Lighting Zones checkbox on, when we adjust the image, you'll see these green lines defining lighting zones. The red dots represent light samples or sources. If I move the black point slider to the right, you can see that these light zone areas get concentrated in only the brightest areas of the image. I'll go ahead and crank the brightness slider all the way up. With Live Ray on, you can see that these adjustments have given more direction to the lighting. Now the image has much more punch. An exciting new option is the HDR Light Studio plugin. This plugin lets you customize your light domes to get exactly the lighting and reflections you want for your scene. Again, in this demo, we'll start off with no lights in the scene and Live Ray on, and the OpenGL model view set to Hidden Line. This camera model was created by Chris Tyler, one of our expert Strata users and instructors. Chris used the Polygon Subdivision Modeler in Design 3D to create this model. To light this using HDR Light Studio, we'll need a background in the light dome. If we start off with a light dome that's a photograph, like this bridge center image, you can see that initially the lighting is very subtle using just the light dome. This camera has a lot of black surfaces and reflective surfaces, so not a lot of areas where diffuse lighting will generate much to see. If I click on the Use as Background Reflected checkbox, you can see a significant difference. However, it's very even, and it has an uninteresting distribution of light and reflections. With HDR Light Studio, it's easy to make your lighting dramatic and tailored to your model. We'll start with a blank sheet by setting the light dome to None. Now, without a background loaded, Design 3D will create a blank one for you when you click the Edit HDR Light Studio Lighting button. You can see that Design 3D goes into a special editing mode, and the HDR Light Studio editing window comes up. This large dark area in the middle is our blank background. If we had started with an image-based background, like the bridge center, that image would show as our background here. Across the top of the window are the lighting options. To add a light, you just click on the shape you want to insert. I'll start by adding a round light. The buttons at the top of the window let you click directly on the model to place the selected light. In this case, the round light we just added. The option currently selected is Illumination. I'll click on the right side of the camera to put some light there. Notice how the light has moved position from the center of the window to the right a bit. Just enough to be exactly where it needs to be to illuminate the edge of the camera. I can adjust many aspects of this light source, but for now I'll just warm up the color a bit. Next, I'll add a rectangle or box light and make it a cool purple color. I'll use the reflection option to place the light so it will bounce off this edge of the camera. Next, I'll add a picture light. You can see that HDR Light Studio comes with a great selection of high dynamic range images of various kinds of light sources. I'll select this window, then use the reflection tool to place it so that it reflects right off of the center of the lens. There's so much more to learn about HDR Light Studio and how it works with Design 3D, but we just don't have time in this tutorial to cover all of those options. Be sure to check out the Strata 3D University and the user guides for more information about using lighting. Both the Design 3D and HDR Light Studio user guides can be accessed from the User Guide button at the top of the Getting Started dialog.